When we first moved to Ridgewood Hills, I believed we had finally found peace after years of urban chaos. The streets were clean and quiet. Children played without fear. Neighbors waved politely from manicured lawns. The air smelled fresher somehow, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and backyard barbecues. Our modest two-story home stood proudly on Cedar Lane, its white fence gleaming under the summer sun. After my father's military discharge and my mother's health struggles, this neighborhood represented everything we had dreamed about during difficult times: a fresh start, a sanctuary. The moving truck had barely pulled away when I noticed her approaching. A woman in her early 50s with perfectly highlighted hair, designer sunglasses perched atop her head, and a clipboard clutched against her chest. She did not introduce herself. She did not welcome us to the neighborhood. She simply stepped onto our property as if she owned it and began scanning the premises with narrowed eyes. "You have a significant dry patch on your front lawn," she announced, pointing toward a small yellowed area near our mailbox. "Ridgewood Hills has strict landscaping standards. This constitutes a Code 3 violation under HOA bylaws." My father stepped forward, extending his hand in greeting. "Hello, I am James Wilson. We just moved in today. And you are?" "Karen Peterson, HOA president." She did not take his hand. Instead, she scribbled something on her clipboard. "You have 72 hours to address the lawn issue before formal citation." My father maintained his composure, his military discipline evident in his straight posture and measured tone. "We appreciate the information, Ms. Peterson. We are still getting settled, but lawn care is definitely on our list. Is there a welcome packet with the HOA guidelines so we can make sure we comply with everything?" Karen looked at him as if he had suggested something preposterous. "The guidelines were provided during your closing. Ignorance of the rules is not an acceptable excuse in Ridgewood Hills." She turned to leave, then paused. "And do remove those moving boxes from your garage before the weekend. Open garage doors with visible clutter violate Section 5, Paragraph C of our community standards." As she marched back across the street, my mother whispered beside me, "James, what have we gotten ourselves into?" "Just someone taking their role a bit too seriously," my father replied, but I could see concern flicker across his face. "Let us get the house in order. Everything will be fine." But everything was not fine. The next morning I spotted Corinne walking slowly past our house, taking photographs with her phone. When she noticed me watching through the window, she did not look away or appear embarrassed. She simply raised her eyebrows, snapped another picture, and continued her patrol. By afternoon, neighbors on both sides had mysteriously found reasons to avoid conversation with us. The friendly waves ceased. One woman actually crossed the street rather than walk past our driveway. My younger brother Tommy, only 14 and eager to make friends, returned from exploring the neighborhood with slumped shoulders. "The kids said we are trouble," he reported quietly. "They said their parents told them to stay away from our house." 3 days later, a formal letter arrived in our mailbox. The envelope bore the Ridgewood Hills HOA insignia, a stylized tree enclosed in a perfect circle. Inside, a typewritten notice listed 4 separate violations, including the lawn issue, improper garbage can placement, unauthorized vehicle parking, our moving truck which had departed days ago, and excessive noise, though we had been nearly silent, tiptoeing around our own home. The letter concluded with a warning. Failure to remedy these violations within 7 days will result in initial fines of $100 per infraction, with penalties doubling weekly thereafter. Continued noncompliance may result in property liens and legal action. My mother sat at our kitchen table, the letter trembling in her hands. "James, we cannot afford these fines. Not after everything we have spent on the move, on my medical bills. I know, Sarah. My father's voice remained steady, but I could see tension in the set of his jaw. I will speak with her again. There must be some reasonable person behind all this formality. That evening, my father crossed the street to Corinne's immaculate colonial house. I watched from our front window as he knocked politely on her door. Their conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Corinne gestured repeatedly toward our property, her movements becoming increasingly animated. My father nodded respectfully throughout, though I could see his shoulders stiffening. When he returned, his expression was grave. "I think we made an enemy before we even unpacked," he said quietly. "She claims the entire neighborhood has complained about us, says we are disrupting the harmony of Ridgewood Hills." "But we have barely spoken to anyone," my mother protested. My father nodded. "Exactly. This is not about rules, this is about power." He gazed out the window toward Corinne's house, and apparently we are her newest project. That night, I overheard my parents speaking in hushed tones in their bedroom. "Maybe this was a mistake," my mother whispered. "Maybe we should have stayed in the apartment until we found somewhere more affordable, less regulated." "This is our home now," my father replied firmly. "We do not run from bullies, never have, never will. We just need to understand the rules and play the game better than she does." But as I drifted to sleep that night, I wondered if any game against Corinne could be won. She did not just control the HOA. She controlled the entire social fabric of Ridgewood Hills, and she had marked us as outsiders from the moment we arrived. 3 weeks into our new life at Ridgewood Hills, Corinne's campaign of harassment evolved from petty to personal. We had addressed every item on her violation list, spent hundreds on emergency lawn treatment, purchased the exact shade of gray trash bins specified in the HOA manual, even repainted our mailbox post to match the approved neighborhood palette. None of it mattered. She simply found new targets. On a quiet Tuesday evening, as our family finished dinner, aggressive pounding rattled our front door. My father opened it to find Corinne standing beside a visibly uncomfortable police officer. "This is the residence," Corinne declared, pointing dramatically. "They have been blasting music for hours. The entire block has been disturbed." The officer looked past her to my father. "Sir, we received a noise complaint about this property." My father stepped aside, gesturing toward our silent living room. "Officer, we have been having a family dinner. No music, no television, no noise whatsoever." The policeman surveyed our quiet home, nodding, my mother clearing plates and Tommy doing homework at the table. He nodded apologetically. "Appears to be a misunderstanding, ma'am. I am not detecting any noise violations here." Corinne's face flushed crimson. "They obviously turned it off when they saw your car. They have been absolutely disruptive. Ask anyone on the street." "We have lived here 3 weeks," my father said calmly. "We have had no gatherings, no parties, not even visitors yet. We value our quiet as much as any neighbor." After the officer departed, Corinne remained on our porch, her finger jabbing toward my father's chest. "I know exactly what you people are doing. This perfect family act does not fool me. Ms. Peterson, we have complied with every HOA request. We simply want to live peacefully in our home." "Keep it that way," she hissed before storming off, her designer shoes clicking sharply against our freshly pressure-washed driveway. The next morning brought new trouble. As Tommy left for school, 2 neighborhood men approached him at the end of our driveway. From the kitchen window, I watched their confrontation. The men pointing toward the stop sign at our corner, Tommy shaking his head repeatedly, his backpack clutched protectively against his chest. When he burst through the door moments later, tears streamed down his face. They said I vandalized the stop sign. They said Karen showed them pictures of me doing it last night. My father immediately walked outside, approaching the men who still lingered near our property. Their conversation was tense but brief. When he returned, his expression was thunderous. Someone spray-painted an obscenity on the back of the stop sign, he explained. Karen told everyone she has security footage of Tommy doing it around 10 p.m. last night. But he was home, my mother exclaimed. We were all home, watching that documentary until nearly midnight. Exactly. My father pulled out a leather-bound notebook and began writing. Date, time, false accusation, witnesses present. We need to document everything now. The following week, animal control appeared at our door. A complaint had been filed about our aggressive, constantly barking dog, creating a neighborhood nuisance. The animal control officer looked confused when she met our elderly Labrador, Rusty, who could barely summon the energy to greet visitors, much less bark continuously. "This dog?" she questioned, watching as Rusty promptly fell asleep at her feet. The complaint mentioned aggressive behavior and non-stop barking. "Rusty is 12 years old," I explained. "He has arthritis, he mainly sleeps." The officer shook her head. "This is the third unfounded call I have had to this neighborhood this month." She lowered her voice. "Between us, they all came from the same address across the street." That night, as if summoned by our discussion of her, Karen appeared again at our door, this time well after 9 p.m. Her knocking was so forceful that a picture fell from our entryway wall. "Your dog has been howling for hours," she shouted when my father answered. "The entire neighborhood is filing complaints." Rusty, hearing himself mentioned, raised his head sleepily from his bed in the corner before promptly dozing off again. "Ms. Peterson," my father said with remarkable restraint, "this is becoming harassment. Our dog is sleeping, as he has been all evening. Please do not knock on our door after hours again unless it is a genuine emergency." "This is an emergency," she shrieked. "My property values, my peaceful community. You are destroying everything I have built here." After she left, I began researching Karen Peterson online. Local community forums revealed a disturbing pattern. 3 years ago, a Hispanic family had moved onto Maple Court. They lasted 4 months before selling at a loss. Last year, an elderly couple on Oak Drive faced daily citations until they too departed. Karen's name appeared repeatedly in the comments, always at the center of neighborhood enforcement actions. A soft knock on our door the following afternoon revealed a different kind of visitor. An older gentleman with kind eyes stood on our porch, glancing nervously over his shoulder before speaking. "James Wilson, I am Robert from 2 streets over, thought I should stop by." He lowered his voice. "You are not the first. She always picks one family to target, makes examples of them. Most folks stay quiet because they do not want to be next." "Why us?" my father asked. "We have followed every rule." Robert shrugged sadly. "Does not matter. Sometimes it is new families, sometimes different families, sometimes just whoever does not immediately defer to her authority. Just be careful, document everything. She has friends on the local council." As he walked away, I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. This was not just neighborly pettiness. This was calculated, systematic, and my family had been selected as Karen's newest victims. I will never forget the evening that changed everything. It was a perfectly ordinary Thursday. My mother had prepared her special lasagna. Tommy was excitedly sharing stories from his science class. My father listened attentively, occasionally chuckling at my brother's enthusiastic descriptions of their frog dissection. The flash of emergency lights through our dining room window silenced our conversation instantly. Red and blue patterns danced across our walls as two police cruisers pulled into our driveway, lights blazing but sirens mercifully silent. "Stay inside," my father instructed calmly, rising from his chair. "I will handle this." Before he reached the door, aggressive knocking rattled our entire front entrance. My mother instinctively moved to stand beside Tommy, her hand protective on his shoulder. I peered through the curtains and saw 4 officers on our porch, their expressions serious and postures alert. When my father opened the door, the lead officer immediately requested that he step outside. Their voices carried through the partially open entrance. "Sir, we received a report of a domestic disturbance at this address. Caller indicated possible violence occurring inside the residence." "Violence?" My father sounded genuinely bewildered. "Officer, we were having a family dinner. My wife, 2 children, and I were eating lasagna and discussing my son's science project." "We need to verify the safety of all occupants, sir. Standard procedure. May we come inside?" My father stepped aside, allowing the officers entry. They surveyed our interrupted dinner, noting my mother's obvious confusion and the half-eaten food still steaming on our plates. "Ma'am," one officer addressed my mother directly, "are you and your children safe? Do you feel threatened in any way?" The implication struck my mother like a physical blow. "What? No, we were having dinner. My husband has never. He would never." Her voice broke as tears welled in her eyes. Tommy began crying, not understanding why policemen were in our dining room questioning whether our father had hurt us. I felt my own anger building as I watched this scene unfold. The humiliation of my family, the invasion of our home, all based on a malicious lie. Through our front window, I spotted Corinne standing in her driveway across the street. Even from this distance, I could see her satisfied smile as she watched the unfolding chaos she had orchestrated. My father maintained his composure, retrieving his wallet from the counter. "Officers, I am James Wilson, 22 years United States Marine Corps, retired Master Sergeant." He presented his military ID. "I understand you are doing your job. Someone reported a disturbance, but I assure you that report was false." The officers exchanged glances, their postures gradually relaxing as they assessed the situation. "Sir, we have to investigate all domestic calls. You understand?" "I do understand, and I respect that." My father's voice remained steady. "Would you like to speak with each family member separately? Would that satisfy protocol?" After 15 excruciating minutes of questioning, the officers apologized for the disturbance and departed. As their vehicles pulled away, neighbors who had gathered to watch the spectacle slowly dispersed, all except Corinne, who remained in her driveway, arms folded across her chest. The moment the door closed, I exploded. She did this. She called them. I saw her watching from across the street like it was some kind of show. "Honey," my mother began, but I could not contain my fury. "No, she has gone too far. First the HOA notices, then animal control, then accusing Tommy of vandalism, and now this. She called the police on us. She made them think Dad was hurting us." My mother sat heavily in her chair, silent tears streaming down her face. Tommy hugged Rusty tightly, his small shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. My father stood motionless at the window, watching as Corinne finally returned to her house, her mission accomplished. The silence that followed was deafening. Our half-eaten dinner grew cold. The sanctuary of our home had been violated in the most fundamental way. Corinne had not just attacked our property or our reputation, she had attacked our family itself. Later that night, After Tommy had finally fallen asleep, I found my parents speaking quietly in the kitchen. My mother looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "James, I cannot live like this," she whispered. "The stress is not good for my health. Maybe we should consider selling." The suggestion hung in the air between them. Selling would mean financial ruin. We had invested everything in this house. It was supposed to be our forever home, our safe place after years of military relocations and rentals. My father took my mother's hands in his. "Sarah, I have respected her position. I have followed every rule. I have been diplomatic and reasonable, but tonight crossed a line." Something in his tone made me pause in the hallway, listening intently. "I have been patient because that is who I am. I do not look for conflict, but she called the authorities on our family over nothing. She tried to paint me as dangerous, as violent." His voice hardened. "I am tired of being polite to bullies." "What can we do?" my mother asked desperately. "She controls everything here. The HOA, the social circles, even some of the local officials from what that nice Robert told you. Remember David Collins, my old commander?" My father's voice held a new certainty. "He called last week about a position. The county sheriff's department is expanding their community policing division. They need experienced officers, especially those with military backgrounds." "A deputy sheriff," my mother sounded surprised. "You never mentioned this." "I was not considering it. It would mean more training, starting a new career path when we just got settled." He paused. "But David said they particularly want someone for this district, someone who understands community relations." "This district," my mother repeated. "You mean?" "Yes, Ridgewood Hills falls under their jurisdiction." I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle my gasp. My father, a sheriff's deputy, with authority over our own neighborhood. "It would take time," he continued. "Academy training, certification, but David thinks I am a perfect candidate with my background." For the first time since the police left our home, I heard hope in my mother's voice. "Do it, James. Apply. We need someone with actual authority on our side." In the darkness of the hallway, I smiled for the first time that evening. Corinne had pushed us to what she thought was our breaking point, but she had miscalculated. She had not broken us. She had awakened something dormant in my father, a determination that anyone who served with him would have recognized immediately. The warrior had returned. The transformation in my father began subtly. First came the early morning runs, 5 miles before dawn, his breath visible in the cool morning air as he circled our neighborhood. Then the meticulous attention to physical training, converting our garage into a modest gym space. His military discipline, always present but softened by civilian life, reasserted itself with quiet intensity. The academy training schedule was grueling. Up at 4:30 a.m., home often after 8 p.m. Weekends filled with study sessions and practical exams. Through it all, he never complained. Instead, there was a renewed purpose in his movements, a clarity in his eyes that I had not seen since his active duty days. Corinne, oblivious to this metamorphosis, continued her campaign against our family. Having tasted blood with the police incident, she escalated her tactics. Violation notices appeared on our door weekly, often for infractions that did not exist or that no one else in the neighborhood was cited for. Front yard decorative lighting does not meet approved lumen standard. Read one citation. Unauthorized plant species in visible landscaping, stated another, referring to the rose bushes my mother had carefully transplanted from our previous home, identical to those in at least 5 other yards on our street. I began documenting everything. Each time Corinne approached our property, I positioned myself at a window, phone, camera recording. When she harangued my mother about our mailbox height, which matched every other mailbox on the block, I captured every word, every gesture, every contemptuous expression. "What are you doing with all that footage?" Tommy asked one afternoon, watching as I organized the videos into clearly labeled folders. "Evidence," I replied simply. "Someday it might be useful." As weeks passed, our family dynamics shifted. We stopped hiding indoors. My mother tended her garden defiantly in full view of Corinne's surveillance. Tommy rode his bicycle on the street again, head held high despite the whispers of neighbors. I sat boldly on our front porch, reading books and giving Corinne a pleasant wave whenever she drove past. Our small acts of normalcy infuriated her. She wanted us cowering, apologetic, and ultimately gone. Instead, we reclaimed our right to exist in our own home, in our own neighborhood. Her frustration manifested in increasingly desperate measures. One morning, a tow truck appeared in our driveway. "Ma'am, I have orders to remove this vehicle for unauthorized parking," the driver explained to my bewildered mother, pointing to our family sedan parked in our own driveway. My mother stood her ground. "This is our private property, our car, our driveway. Who authorized this tow?" "Ridgewood Hills HOA," he replied, checking his paperwork. "Authorized by K. Peterson for code violations." I was already recording. "Sir, can you explain what code allows the HOA to tow a vehicle from a private driveway without owner consent?" The driver hesitated, reviewing his documentation more carefully. "Well, it says here, insufficient setback from sidewalk parameter." "And who measured this setback?" I pressed. I guess the HOA did." "Would you like to measure it now? We have the HOA guidelines right here with the exact specifications." The tow truck departed without our car, but Corinne's message was clear. She would use any means, legitimate or not, to make our lives difficult. What she did not realize was that her increasingly erratic behavior was beginning to alienate her supporters. Mrs. Abernathy, who had previously avoided eye contact with our family, stopped my mother in the grocery store. "Your roses are beautiful," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "I do not understand why Corinne is so fixated on them. They look just like the approved variety to me." Mr. Chen, whose immaculate lawn had been Corinne's gold standard for neighborhood appearance, nodded politely to my father one morning during his run. "Your property is looking very nice," he commented. "Very respectable." Small gestures, perhaps, but significant. The neighborhood was watching, and not everyone appreciated Corinne's vendetta. One evening, as dusk settled over Ridgewood Hills, I spotted movement across the street. Corinne stood on her lawn, phone raised, photographing our house yet again. I stepped outside, my own phone recording discreetly at my side. "Good evening, Ms. Peterson," I called pleasantly. "Is there something specific you are looking for in those photos? Perhaps I could help you get a better angle." She lowered her phone, her expression venomous. "Your porch light is non-compliant. It exceeds permitted brightness levels after sunset." "Really? It is the exact fixture that came with the house. The same one on your porch, in fact." "Do not get smart with me, young lady. I know exactly what your family is doing." I maintained my pleasant tone. "And what is that, Ms. Peterson? You think you can just move in here and change things, break the rules, disrupt our community standards?" She took a step toward me, her voice rising. "People like you are why neighborhoods decline." From the house next door, I noticed curtains parting. Mrs. Donovan, a retired teacher who had previously sided with Corinne in HOA matters, watched our interaction with evident discomfort. "Ms. Peterson," I replied calmly, "we have followed every legitimate rule in the HOA guidelines. We have responded to every citation, including those that seemed creatively interpreted. We simply want to live peacefully in our home." "Peacefully?" she spat. "Is that why your father is never home, always sneaking out early, coming back late? What is he really doing?" "Working," I answered truthfully, "contributing to the community." She scoffed. "I know trouble when I see it, and your family is trouble." As she stormed back to her house, Mrs. Donovan stepped onto her porch. "Are you all right, dear?" she called softly. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Donovan." The older woman hesitated, then spoke again. She was not always like this. After her husband left, something changed, but this has gone too far. She shook her head sadly. Too far. Later that night, I showed my father the recording of my encounter with Corinne. "You handled that perfectly," he said proudly, "respectful but firm." "How much longer?" I asked. He understood my question immediately. 2 more weeks of field training, then the certification exam. And then, a small smile touched his lips. And then I come home with a badge and a new perspective on community policing. For the first time in months, I felt genuine hope. Corinne's reign was approaching its inevitable end, and she did not even know it. The day my father was officially sworn in as a sheriff's deputy marked a quiet watershed in our family's journey. There was no grandiose celebration, no public announcement. He simply returned home that evening, placed his new badge carefully on our mantel, and embraced my mother. "We are not prey anymore," he whispered to her. My mother wiped away a tear, touching the badge reverently. "I am so proud of you, James." We celebrated with a simple dinner, speaking in hushed, excited tones about what this might mean for our future in Ridgewood Hills. My father remained modest about his new position. "This is not about revenge," he reminded us. "This is about justice, about proper use of authority. I took an oath today to protect everyone in this county, including Corinne Peterson." Tommy grinned. "But you get to wear a cool uniform and drive a sheriff's car." My father chuckled. "Those are just tools of the job, son. The real power is in doing the right thing consistently, fairly for everyone." We thought news of my father's new position would spread gradually through neighborhood channels. We underestimated the efficiency of Ridgewood Hills' gossip network. Corinne discovered his new occupation the very next morning. She had been driving past our house, her daily surveillance routine, when she spotted the sheriff's department vehicle parked in our driveway. She slammed her brakes so abruptly that her tires screeched against the asphalt. For several seconds she simply stared, her expression visible even from our window, pure, unadulterated shock. By afternoon, an emergency HOA meeting had been called. The email notification cited urgent community safety concerns requiring immediate attention. We were not explicitly mentioned, but the subtext was clear. "Should we attend?" my mother asked nervously. My father shook his head. "I am on duty tonight. Besides, let them talk. We have nothing to hide." From neighbors who later shared details with us, Corinne's performance at the HOA meeting was nothing short of spectacular. She paced before the assembled residents, declaring that dangerous elements had infiltrated their peaceful community. She claimed that certain residents had manipulated the system to gain inappropriate authority over law-abiding citizens. "We need protection from those who would abuse their power," she reportedly shouted, her composure completely abandoned. "The sanctity of Ridgewood Hills is under attack." Her dramatic pronouncements might have carried more weight had not my father, in full sheriff's deputy uniform, been called to the very same community center to address a minor disturbance outside. A teenage driver had accidentally backed into a parked car in the lot, and someone had called for assistance. My father handled the situation with calm professionalism, helping the distressed teenager exchange information with the vehicle owner, explaining the proper accident reporting procedures, and ensuring everyone departed safely. He did not enter the HOA meeting. He did not need to. His presence outside, his evident competence and composure spoke volumes. When the meeting concluded, residents filed past him. Many nodded respectfully. Some offered quiet congratulations. Corinne emerged last, her face flushed with fury when she spotted him. "This is a conflict of interest," she declared loudly, marching directly toward him. "You cannot be a resident under HOA governance and a law enforcement officer with jurisdiction over the same area." My father maintained his professional demeanor. "Good evening, Ms. Peterson. Is there something I can help you with?" "You planned this," she accused, her voice rising. "You deliberately obtained this position to intimidate me, to undermine the HOA's authority." Several residents paused to watch the confrontation. My father's response was measured and clear, audible to everyone nearby. "Ms. Peterson, I applied for this position because I believe in community service. 22 years in the Marines taught me the value of protecting others. This badge represents the trust the county has placed in me to uphold the law fairly for all citizens." He paused. "Including you." Corinne sputtered, searching for a response that would maintain her position while acknowledging the shifting power dynamic. Finding none, she retreated to what she knew best: threats. "This is not over, Wilson. Not by a long shot. The HOA board will be discussing your family's numerous ongoing violations next week. Prepare for significant penalties." As she stormed to her car, Mr. Abernathy, who had served as HOA treasurer for 5 years, approached my father. "Deputy Wilson," he said, loud enough for others to hear, "my wife and I want to congratulate you on your new position. It is reassuring to have someone with your experience looking out for our neighborhood." One by one, other residents expressed similar sentiments. Not everyone, certainly. Corinne's closest allies departed quickly, avoiding contact, but enough to signal a tangible shift in the community's allegiance. That evening, as news spread through Ridgewood Hills that their newest deputy sheriff was the very man Corinne had been systematically targeting for months, text messages began circulating. Neighbors who had witnessed Corinne's campaign shared their observations. Others recounted similar experiences from years past. The unified front she had maintained through intimidation began showing substantial cracks, and Corinne, sensing her control slipping away, grew increasingly desperate. The next morning, a formal complaint arrived at the sheriff's department, alleging Deputy James Wilson had threatened and intimidated an HOA official during a routine neighborhood matter. The complaint, filed by Corinne Peterson, demanded an immediate investigation into abuse of power and professional misconduct. When the shift supervisor called my father into his office to discuss the allegations, my father calmly presented his own evidence: dates, times, and detailed accounts of every interaction with Corinne since our arrival in Ridgewood Hills. He included statements from neighbors who had witnessed her behavior, photographs of our property demonstrating compliance with HOA standards, and documentation of the false police report she had filed against our family. The supervisor reviewed the materials carefully. "James, I have been doing this job for 27 years. Know what I see here. I see a community bully who just discovered someone stood up to her." He closed the file. "Keep doing your job professionally. Document everything. This complaint is going nowhere. When my father returned to patrol duty that afternoon, his first call took him to a minor fender bender at the main intersection of Ridgewood Hills. As he directed traffic around the accident scene, Karen drove past slowly, her expression thunderous when she recognized him. She rolled down her window. "This is harassment. You have no right to be here." My father approached her vehicle, professional and courteous. "Ma'am, I need you to move along. We are clearing an accident scene." "I will be calling your superiors again," she threatened. "That is your right, Ms. Peterson. Now please proceed through the intersection carefully. Safety first." That exchange was witnessed by at least a dozen residents stopped in traffic. By evening, the story had circulated throughout the neighborhood, how Deputy Wilson had remained perfectly professional while Karen had created a scene at an accident site. Public perception was shifting rapidly. What Karen had failed to understand was that many residents had tolerated her tyranny not out of respect, but out of fear of becoming her next target. With my father now representing legitimate authority, her power base was eroding by the hour. For months, I had been collecting evidence of Karen's harassment campaign against our family. Every confrontation, every false citation, every baseless complaint. Each incident cataloged, dated, and stored securely in digital folders. I had not been certain how this documentation might someday prove useful, only that truth eventually requires evidence. That moment arrived unexpectedly. Karen, increasingly unhinged by her waning influence, escalated her attacks on our family through the neighborhood's online platforms. In the Ridgewood Hills Facebook group, she posted a lengthy diatribe accusing us of corrupting the neighborhood's values and suggesting my father had abused his position to avoid HOA regulations. Most residents ignored her post. A few even commented in our defense. But Karen's closest allies amplified her message, creating an atmosphere of tension that affected the entire community. After discussing it with my parents, I made a decision. The time for silent documentation had passed. The time for public accountability had arrived. I spent an entire weekend editing my footage. I removed anything that might seem manipulated or out of context, focusing on clear examples of harassment. The final compilation included Karen photographing our home, repeatedly from the street. Her confronting my mother over rose bushes identical to those throughout the neighborhood. Her false claims about our dog's behavior. Her attempts to have our legally parked car towed from our own driveway. The aftermath of her false police report about domestic violence. Her public confrontation with my father in his official capacity. I uploaded the video to the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption: a documented history of targeted harassment against the Wilson family. I did not include commentary. I did not make accusations. I simply presented evidence and let it speak for itself. Within hours, the post had hundreds of comments. By morning, it had been shared beyond our neighborhood, reaching local community forums. My phone began buzzing with message notifications from neighbors I had never spoken with. Some shared their own stories of intimidation at Karen's hands. Others expressed shock at what they witnessed in the footage. Most significantly, several HOA board members contacted my father directly, requesting a private meeting. "I never thought it would get this kind of reaction," I told my parents over breakfast. "People are actually speaking up now." My father nodded solemnly. When bullies operate in darkness, they appear all-powerful. Shine a light on their behavior, and suddenly everyone can see the truth. Karen's response was swift and predictable. She filed a formal harassment complaint against our entire family with the county courthouse, claiming we had engaged in cyberbullying and defamation of character through heavily edited and manipulative video content. The complaint was dismissed during preliminary review. The judge noted that unedited documentary footage of public behavior could not constitute harassment, regardless of how unflattering that footage might be to the subject. This legal defeat pushed Karen to more desperate measures. She called an emergency session of the HOA board, demanding they take collective action against our family. To her shock, several board members refused to attend. Those who did appear listened in uncomfortable silence as she proposed exorbitant fines for nebulous violations and suggested legal action against my father for conflict of interest. When she finally paused for breath, Mr. Abernathy, the HOA treasurer, cleared his throat. "Karen, I move that we table these proposals pending a full board review of recent community complaints." "What complaints?" Karen demanded. "Complaints about your leadership," Mrs. Donovan stated quietly. "Your targeting of the Wilson family, your selective enforcement of regulations, your use of HOA resources for personal vendettas." "That is absurd," Karen protested. "I have only ever acted in the best interests of this community." "Then you will not object to a formal review and vote of confidence," Mr. Abernathy suggested, "as provided in Section 12 of our HOA charter." The color drained from Karen's face. "You cannot be serious." "The motion has been seconded," another board member confirmed. "We will schedule a special meeting for next week. All residents will be notified and encouraged to attend." News of the upcoming vote spread through Ridgewood Hills like wildfire. Neighbors who had previously avoided eye contact now waved to us from their yards. Several stopped by with small welcoming gifts, potted plants, homemade cookies, bottles of wine, as if trying to make amends for their earlier silence. Karen, meanwhile, grew increasingly erratic. She was spotted driving slowly past our house multiple times daily. She approached my father's superior officers at the sheriff's department again, insisting they investigate him for unspecified, corrupt practices. When these attempts failed, she resorted to confronting random neighbors on the street, demanding they stand with her against the troublemakers who were destroying community standards. The night before the special HOA meeting, Karen crossed the final line. My father was on patrol when a call came in about a disturbance at the community mailboxes. He arrived to find Karen engaged in a heated argument with Mrs. Chen, whose husband had recently nodded to my father during his morning run. "You are all turning against me," Karen was shouting, jabbing her finger toward Mrs. Chen's face. "After everything I have done for this neighborhood." When she spotted my father's patrol car, Karen immediately redirected her fury. This is all your fault. You turned everyone against me." "Ma'am, please lower your voice," my father requested calmly. "This is a public area." "Do not tell me what to do," she screamed, her composure completely abandoned. "I was maintaining standards here before you ever arrived. I built this community." Several residents had gathered, drawn by the commotion. They watched in stunned silence as Karen's years of carefully cultivated authority dissolved into public hysteria. "Ms. Peterson," my father maintained his professional tone, "I need you to calm down and return to your home. You are disturbing the peace." "Disturbing the peace? I am the peace in Ridgewood Hills." She stepped toward him aggressively. "You and your family need to leave. No one wanted you here." "That is not true, Karen," Mrs. Donovan spoke up from the gathering crowd. "The Wilsons have been nothing but respectful neighbors." "They have undermined my authority," Karen whirled toward the onlookers. "Can you not see what they are doing? They are destroying everything we built here." Mr. Chen stepped forward. "The only person shouting and causing problems right now is you, Karen." That statement, from the man whose lawn she had praised as the neighborhood gold standard for years, seemed to break something inside Karen. She turned back to my father, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "This is not over, not by a long shot. You may have fooled everyone else, but I know what you really are." My father simply nodded. "Ms. Peterson, I strongly suggest you return home and prepare for tomorrow's meeting. I believe you have some explaining to do to your neighbors." The next evening, the community center was filled beyond capacity. Every resident of Ridgewood Hills had turned out for the special HOA meeting, the first time many had ever attended such a gathering. Karen arrived dressed immaculately, her composure apparently restored. She took her usual seat at the head table, arranging her notes with practiced precision. But the tension in her shoulders betrayed her awareness that something fundamental had shifted. Mr. Abernathy called the meeting to order. "Before we proceed to the vote of confidence regarding our HOA president, we will open the floor to community comments. Please state your name and address before speaking." For several seconds, silence hung over the room. Years of Karen's intimidation had conditioned residents against public dissent. Then Mrs. Donovan stood. "Margaret Donovan, 1422 Cedar Lane. I have lived in Ridgewood Hills for 12 years. She straightened her shoulders. "I have witnessed Karen Peterson systematically target new residents who did not immediately conform to her personal vision for this community. The Wilson family is merely the most recent example. They have complied with every legitimate HOA regulation, yet faced harassment, false accusations, and even police involvement based on fabricated complaints." Another resident rose. "Robert Maxwell, 1587 Oak Drive. 3 years ago, my daughter's quinceañera celebration was shut down by noise complaints, despite being held during daylight hours on a Saturday and well within noise ordinance limits. Karen personally called the police, claiming we were hosting an unauthorized public event." One by one, residents shared their stories. A pattern emerged, a years-long campaign of selective enforcement, intimidation, and abuse of HOA authority. Karen's expression remained frozen in a tight smile, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. When the testimonies concluded, Mr. Abernathy turned to Karen. "Would you like to respond to these concerns before we proceed to the vote?" Karen rose slowly, surveying the room with cold disdain. "What I have witnessed tonight is nothing short of coordinated character assassination. For 8 years, I have dedicated my time and energy to maintaining the standards that make Ridgewood Hills desirable. Property values have increased under my leadership. Crime has remained virtually non-existent. Our community is the envy of surrounding neighborhoods." She paused, her gaze settling on my father, who sat quietly in the back row. "And my thanks for this dedication. A campaign of slander orchestrated by newcomers who refuse to respect our established community norms. If this is how Ridgewood Hills now chooses to operate, perhaps new leadership is indeed appropriate." With that, she gathered her materials and walked toward the exit, her head held high. At the door, she turned back. "I hereby tender my resignation as HOA president, effective immediately. Good luck maintaining your property values without proper oversight." The silence that followed her departure lasted only moments before spontaneous applause erupted throughout the room. The relief was palpable, a collective exhale from a community that had lived too long under authoritarian rule. The meeting continued with the election of an interim HOA board, and the establishment of a committee to review and clarify community guidelines. My father was invited to participate as a consultant on community relations, an offer he politely declined to avoid any appearance of impropriety given his law enforcement role. As we walked home that evening, the stars seemed brighter over Ridgewood Hills. Neighbors called greetings from their porches. Children played freely in front yards. Even the air felt lighter somehow, as if the entire neighborhood had awakened from a long, troubled sleep. "Is it really over?" Tommy asked incredulously. My father placed his hand on my brother's shoulder. "This chapter is, but communities like families are always evolving. There will be other challenges." "But not from Corinne," I added confidently. My father smiled. "She made her choice. Now we all move forward." Corinne Peterson listed her house for sale 3 weeks after the HOA meeting. There was no moving company, no farewell party, no formal announcement. A realtor's sign simply appeared in her front yard one morning, and neighbors noticed her car packed with personal belongings departing before dawn the following Saturday. She left Ridgewood Hills as she had ruled it, without transparency, without accountability, without community. The exodus of the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer created space for healing. The interim HOA board, led by Mr. Abernathy and Mrs. Donovan, initiated a comprehensive review of all outstanding violation notices. Dozens were immediately rescinded as unwarranted or selectively enforced. The remaining legitimate concerns were addressed through cooperative communication rather than punitive measures. One crisp autumn morning, a knock at our door revealed the new HOA leadership committee standing on our porch. They came not with citations but with apologies. "The HOA failed your family," Mr. Abernathy stated sincerely. "We allowed one person's agenda to override fairness and community values. For that, we are deeply sorry." My father accepted their apology with characteristic grace. Neighborhoods, like any community, require participation to remain healthy. Perhaps this experience will encourage more residents to become actively involved in governance. "That is already happening," Mrs. Donovan reported happily. "Our last meeting had record attendance. People are volunteering for committees, suggesting improvements, actually talking to each other." After they departed, my father stood thoughtfully at the window, watching as they visited other homes that had suffered under Corinne's regime. "This is how community should work," he observed. "Not through fear, but through mutual respect." My father's position as sheriff's deputy brought an unexpected dimension to our family's place in Ridgewood Hills. Residents increasingly viewed him not just as a neighbor, but as a community resource, someone who understood both the letter of the law and its spirit. Children waved enthusiastically when his patrol car passed. Elderly residents felt comfortable asking his advice about security concerns. Even teenage skateboarders, typically wary of authority figures, developed a respectful rapport with Deputy Wilson after he helped establish a designated skating area in the community park. The transformation extended beyond official interactions. Where once we had been isolated, our family now occupied a central position in neighborhood life. My mother's health improved as stress diminished. She joined the community garden committee, sharing her expertise in heirloom roses, the very plants Corinne had once cited as violations. Tommy made friends who regularly gathered in our backyard for impromptu football games. I connected with other teenagers through a neighborhood book club that met on our front porch every other week. Our house, once under constant surveillance for potential infractions, became a gathering place, a symbol of resilience and community renewal. As the one-year anniversary of our arrival in Ridgewood Hills approached, my parents decided to host a neighborhood barbecue. Not as a celebration of Corinne's departure or even of our own vindication, but as an affirmation of what communities can become when built on mutual respect. "Are you sure about this?" I asked as my father set up extra tables in our backyard. "That is a lot of people to invite." He smiled. "Remember when we first moved here, how isolated we felt? No one should feel that way in their own neighborhood." The response exceeded our expectations. Virtually every household in Ridgewood Hills sent representatives, families with young children, elderly couples, single professionals, teenagers with carefully constructed indifference that melted amid the festive atmosphere. They brought potluck dishes representing diverse culinary traditions. They brought folding chairs and extra coolers. They brought stories and laughter and the genuine warmth of human connection. As twilight descended, my father stood on our back deck, surveying the gathered community. Someone called for a toast, and conversations quieted as neighbors turned expectantly toward him. "A year ago," my father began, his voice carrying easily across the yard, "we moved to Ridgewood Hills seeking a fresh start. What we found initially was not what we expected." Gentle laughter acknowledged this understatement. "But what we have discovered since then, the real heart of this community, has exceeded our hopes." He raised his glass, not to the past but to the future we build together. Glasses lifted throughout the yard, neighbors nodding in agreement. In that moment, Ridgewood Hills was more than a collection of houses bound by HOA regulations. It was a community in the truest sense, diverse individuals united by shared values and mutual respect. Later that evening, as the last guests departed and we began clearing away remnants of the celebration, I found myself alone on our front porch. The street stretched peacefully before me, porch lights glowing softly against the gathering darkness. From nearby houses came the gentle sounds of family life, a child's laughter, a dog's bark, music playing softly. I remembered the night police cruisers had illuminated these same houses with flashing red and blue. I remembered my mother's tears, my father's quiet determination, my own simmering anger. I remembered Corinne standing in her driveway, arms folded in triumph as she watched our family's humiliation. Now her house stood empty, awaiting new owners who would never know how their home had once been a fortress of intimidation. They would move into a different Ridgewood Hills than we had, one where neighbors introduced themselves with welcome baskets instead of violation notices. One where children played freely without fear of arbitrary rules. One where diversity was celebrated rather than suppressed. My father joined me on the porch, handing me a cup of hot chocolate. "Deep thoughts?" he asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now, how different we are." He nodded. "Challenges either break us or transform us. The choice is always ours." "Do you ever regret moving here, after everything that happened?" He considered the question carefully, gazing out at the peaceful street. "No, this is exactly where we are meant to be." The soft glow of our porch light spilled across the steps, illuminating the path to our front door. No one monitored its brightness or measured its position against arbitrary standards. It simply shone, welcoming and warm, exactly as we intended. This was home now, on our terms in peace.